Hey there, Michael here. A quick note that this is an episode from our Patreon vault. On these patron exclusive episodes, we tend to be a little looser, so heads up that there might be some language in this episode. Also, we released this episode to patrons on October 12th of 2021, right after we saw the movie, so our takes were coming in hot. It's my fault that we don't have a regular episode out today, so my apologies for that, but I have a good reason. As I shared the other day on Twitter, I recently began working with the video game company BioWare on the next installment of Mass Effect. Longtime listeners will have no trouble understanding why I am super excited about this. It has meant that I have a lot less free time than I did before, so the podcasting schedule has been a little bit trickier, but I think we figured it out, and moving forward, everything should be back to normal with our schedule. Knock on wood. All right, now, without further ado, our episode on No Time to Die. Hello, patrons. Michael here with the whole team, Trisha Arand, Brian Bittner, and Alex Calleros. How are you guys doing?
Fantastic.
Great.
Very well.
Excellent. And today we are talking about No Time to Die, the 2021 film directed by Cary Fukunaga, screenplay by Neil Purvis, Robert Wade, Cary Fukunaga, and Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Okay, let's talk about it. So I'm just going to jump right in and say I had so much fun with this movie. This was maybe the most fun I've had in a theater since The Rise of Skywalker, and that's not to compare the quality, but that is to, we all know how I feel about The Rise of Skywalker and like the fun that I have when watching a Star Wars movie. I think there are comparisons to be made about ending a saga that we can talk about there, and things that might have been done right that should have been done in other Star Wars. Anyway, but yeah, I thought this was like really, really well done. I'm very glad I didn't see any of the trailers because I didn't know. I knew very little, right? I knew that there was like another 007 and that he's kind of old and retired, but like I didn't have any sense of like where the story was going to go or I don't know, any of that. So it was really, really fun. I really liked what they did with Bond as a character and that they brought back Leia Seydoux and like she had a big role. Like I feel like this movie, in my opinion, accomplished what all of the Craig Bonds have been trying to do. Like I feel like it hit the sweet spot for me anyway, in terms of being super Bondy, but also being a really well-made, well thought through film, and then also like wrapped it all up nicely and like said farewell to these movies. So I have like just like 5 stars, super happy, loved it. Trisha, should we talk? Do you want to wait? Should we go for you? How are you feeling?
I overall feel really great. As I talked about, we like any Bond movie ever is like a great experience for me. Like even walking out of Spectre, I was like, yep, yes, good, love it. And you know, with more hindsight, I was like, wow, actually that's a bad movie, despite the fact that I just was having the time of my life sitting in that movie theater. And I overall feel like I can't wait to see this movie again. And I want to watch it like 3 more times, basically, because I just feel so close to it. Like I feel so close to it. I feel so close to the character, you know, the James Bond character, especially, but some of the other ones like Q and Moneypenny and M, and even Leia Seydoux's character at this point. I'm just so like up in it. And that's even without having watched a bunch of the trailers either. Like I watched, I think, the first teaser trailer and then really tried hard to avoid most of the trailers for this, although there were things that I couldn't help but read in the news, mostly because people would just send me stuff. I was like, because when someone knows that you're a super fan of something, they're just like, what do you think about Lashana Lynch playing 007? And you're like, well, now I know about that. Yeah. Thank you. But you know, but I think I just feel overwhelmed. This movie is really big and really sprawly. It takes in a lot of territory. It goes a lot of places. I think it hits a bunch of different tones, although overall kind of, I think, hangs together tonally. But it feels potentially pretty overwrought. And that's maybe just from its sort of place in the franchise. And I just think I just like, my heart is so full and like raw, I guess, coming out of this experience. I just feel like I'm maybe too raw. So like anything I say, don't like write it in stone or hold me to it. Like
Sure.
I just want to experience this again and again, and then I'll have some perspective that I can lend a little later. Right now you're going to get piping hot takes and probably not a lot of perspective. And that's just where we are. Also, I just want to say that when you're a super fan of something that the average moviegoer has only a very cursory knowledge about, it is a wild experience to sit in a movie theater with just like a bunch of normies. Because, and I think I just annoyed everybody around me, because there are references in this movie to On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And I was just like, you know, had my breath taken away, where I was like, oh my God, he just said we have all the time in the world. And that doesn't mean anything to anybody but me. You know what I mean? Like,
On your left.
I like yelled. Right. I like yelled, not that loud, but certainly vocally reacted to a few different things in this movie that don't mean anything to anybody that isn't, you know, like a very old fan. So like, for example, they filmed at Goldeneye, which is Ian Fleming's estate in the Caribbean.
Oh, wow.
So I'm like, oh my God, it's Goldeneye. You know, I know what that is and it looks like. So it's just a very weird experience where things hit a little differently for Bond mega fans, and there are dozens of us out there.
Dozens, I say.
Dozens.
So yeah, in conclusion, I'm an obnoxious Bond fan in a movie theater. Don't sit near me, and I have no idea how I feel about this movie, except I love James Bond.
Great. Yes. Understand that perspective. I feel like that's a little bit how I felt with Star Wars, with The Rise of Skywalker, and that we were like talking about it the very next day. That's why I watched it twice in one night, which I had forgotten about until last night.
Wow.
I wanted to do that. I thought about you doing that, and I was like, I know why Michael immediately bought a ticket and went back to watch Rise of Skywalker again. Because when you have to podcast about something that you're just way too close to it, I wish I had time. I wish I'd had time to go back and watch No Time to Die again.
Yeah,
So.
I really want to too. But okay, cool. So no pressure. We're not writing down anything you say in stone. Understandable.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Brian, what was your take on this?
Yeah, very similar. Just had a great time with it. For as long as it didn't feel overwrought, and I have a strong sense of why that we can get into later. And you know, we talked about sort of good versus fun. Like Skyfall feels like a movie you appreciate, whereas like other movies or movies you have like more like Spectre's like a fun movie that's maybe not great. And like Casino Royale, I would say this just felt both. It felt like I was like, I'm having a great time, but now like there's a dialogue scene, but I care about it, and it's a good scene, and like things are happening, and you know, there's the cinematography was beautiful.
Oh yeah.
The you know, and there's an emotional storyline that everything is like revolving around. It's not just sort of happening over on the side. It's all connected, which, you know, they've been trying to do with the last few movies, and I feel like it really worked well with this one. And probably my favorite moment was after the opening sequence with you know, with the spinning car and everything. I was like, oh, this is the trailer. Like I have seen the trailer basically, and now other than maybe some snapshots or whatever, I have no idea what's coming next. I don't know that they're going to be in like a kind of submarine, Trisha, submarine-ish thing. That's not quite a submarine, but and you know, so like I didn't know, obviously like I knew Rami Malek and, you know, Blofeld, whatever, but mostly just feeling like I just the exciting feeling of being 10 minutes into a 3-hour movie and going like, cool, I don't know what's coming next. I'm excited. So yeah, overall loved it. Some cheesy lines I could do without. Maybe next to A View to the Kill, one of the worst, let's get the title in there Do you know what time it is?
Oh, it is.
What? No. Time to die. I just showed someone your watch. It blew his mind. Like, all right, okay.
I like that.
That was a great
That
one.
was fine. That was just like Bondy stuff.
Yeah,
but
like we
Yeah.
need a couple of those. Come on.
but having the title delivered by two character, like, wow.
That is funny. But yeah, there are definitely cheesy lines, but I think what I like about it is that this movie felt it had enough self-awareness happening also
Right.
that it was like, I don't know, it didn't feel like the Skyfall like lines or like the Spectre lines sometimes where like Craig has to say a pun, but tonally it feels completely out of step with like the
Right.
gorgeous cinematography and the like the background and blah blah blah. But we
I
can get into all that.
have a bunch of notes about, I want to continue our what is Bond conversation from Skyfall, and I have a lot of thoughts about that. I won't get into it now. I want to hear what Alex thinks, but yeah, we definitely will come back to that.
Yeah, I feel like we have to talk about what is Bond moving forward, what is
Sure.
this movie
Yeah.
set up and state. So we'll maybe try to save that for the second half, and we'll see where we go with all of that. But yes, Alex, tell us about No Time to Die.
Yeah, I feel similarly to all of you. I feel overwhelmed. I want to see it again. It was such a big movie. It reminded me of like
Yeah.
Avengers Endgame. You know, it had
Mhm.
that
Mhm,
gravity
mhm.
and that sprawl, and that here we're bringing back all the characters. We're gonna wrap it all up in a really satisfying way. I love the directing. I love Cary Fukunaga. He's so like just my taste as far as the way he shoots things, the way he orchestrates action scenes, the way things are edited together, the way he uses sound. Like it's just like good modern filmmaking, and I just really like it. And I think there's something about the Sam Mendes approach to Bond, which was like this gorgeous prestige approach. That was, we talked about this during the Skyfall podcast. For me, it didn't quite mesh with what I wanted from like an action movie. There was something about it that just felt a little too deliberate, a little bit too like we're gonna linger on this shot for just a little bit too long because it's so pretty. I don't feel that with this movie. I think this movie is almost equally gorgeous. It wasn't shot by Roger Deakins, but it's really gorgeous. It's beautifully shot.
Mhm.
But I don't ever feel like things are slowing down just to like luxuriate in the prestigeness. It's just
Right.
we're like
Right.
this is gonna look gorgeous and it's gonna be moving. We're not gonna be like pointing to you how prestige this is. It's just gonna be prestige-y naturally. And I think that was it almost for me. It had the emotional impact I think Skyfall wanted to have on me. I could feel in Skyfall a lot of the movie pointing at me, almost being like, look, this is an emotional scene. Like this is about the mother, and this is about this theme, and you should feel things now. And it was almost more like I'm being told to feel things, whereas in this one, for whatever reason, it snuck up on me. And I think the whole daughter thing, like all this stuff, just kind of culminated. So I really felt something by the end, and it wasn't the movie telling me I should be, and I'm not. It was just naturally happening. So this movie does feel like a beautiful, just like Avengers Endgame, kind of like they nailed kind of a culmination of a lot of different things the different Craig Bond movies were trying to do. This movie, I can, as best as you can maybe do in 1 3-hour block of time, kind of brought all those threads together and did a good version of all of them. Like I got the Casino Royale fun. I got that Cuba sequence that was just pure fun. But I also got a finale that was very emotional and about Bond and about his family stuff. So anyway, yeah, I'm just very impressed that what an achievement it is to bring all those threads together and to nail most of them, for me at least.
Yeah. I think it's really, like you said, there's so much in here. There's so much to talk about. I feel like maybe one first stop that we can make is sort of coming off of your comment about like the Skyfall Sam Mendes approach, the prestige thing. I feel like part of the prestige thing is like there's a certain distance created. And I feel like this is a critique of a lot of like Fincher movies also, is like the precision is like there creates a distance with the audience. And I feel like in this movie, like right from the beginning, that first action scene in wherever the hell they are,
Italy.
is that Italy on the, okay. Yeah.
The
It
bridge,
looks
yeah.
Right, the
Italian.
bridge.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of what I assumed. Yeah, generally. Is so like visceral, and I'm
Mm.
Yeah.
so in it and with the characters. So it's not like I'm watching things happen that are like lovely to look at, but I'm emotionally involved in what's happening. And so I think some of that is the directing. I think some of it is the writing also. Like maybe this is projection, but I felt the Phoebe Waller-Bridge touch throughout, and I appreciated it basically everywhere that it was, where there's like
Women written by women.
well,
They did it.
and just like humanity given to people, like
Yeah.
like humor and yeah, like not
Right,
being
like
afraid
when
of-
when Madeline says like, I want to show you something. He goes, was it another kid? Like just like those little things.
Right.
It's like it just feels like a human joke that someone would make.
right,
Right.
like you do that and then you're laughing and you're having fun, and so I feel like especially that opening action sequence. I didn't know about the spinning car thing either. I hadn't seen that in the trailer.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
was like genuinely like, how are they going to get out of this? But then like to your point, Alex, there's like the use of sound. So like bulletproof glass, guys right up against the window shooting the gun, like pop, pop,
Yeah.
pop, like that tension, like the sound being used to add to the tension. It's also a character scene that's happening in this
Right.
moment where
Exactly.
Bond is struggling with like, can I trust this person that I love? This is like my worst nightmare happening. Like all of that happening all at the same time is like what makes a great scene great. And I feel like this movie was filled with scenes where there was a lot of layers happening like that. But particularly that opening was such a great way to start a movie and get all of that going right from the get-go.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things this film does spectacularly is provide situations, to your point, Michael, for Daniel Craig to show off his acting.
Yeah.
Which is not something that we like think of with Bond movies, where it's like, what about that amazing performance though? Right? Like that's not what you always come away from a Bond movie saying. And I think that even films like Spectre try to do this, but this movie really does it very well, where they create scenes with layers that we can watch Daniel Craig like travel down through the layers and like drill down into the character. And that opening sequence is so good because when they are in the car, Madeline is pleading and trying to get through to him, and you can see him going back and forth, like not just what am I going to do in this situation, but there's like that amazing presence to him where he's in the car and they're shooting at him, but underneath of that he's in like his own inner turmoil. And like I like the moments with Daniel Craig, especially some of his best moments as Bond are when he's like hurt emotionally and but still trying to be like tough.
Steel blue.
And
yeah.
and it comes through and you can see both of those things. So like in Casino Royale, we see that a lot after Vesper betrays him, right? He has that exact same like woundedness, but that power to him. And that whole sequence really is perfect at it just giving him like shit to work through while he's like escaping from the bad guys.
Right.
Yeah, this is, I think out of all the Craig Bond movies, when this one went to the opening titles, I was like, damn,
yeah.
like that is an opening. Like that was so goddamn good. And it was like, it was a 2-part opening too. Even before that has the incredibly intense, incredibly visceral scene with childhood Madeline. Yeah. Like, God, what like a tour de force Bond movie opening. Like so much emotion before the opening credits even roll.
Also, how old was Rami Malek in Flashback World?
That I was really confused about this. I was like, he's
I have timeline questions.
and like because he's like fully grown back then, but not that old now. Yeah.
Yeah. But I want to respond to all this real quick. I want to say that DP was Linus Sandgren, who also did American Hustle and First Man and La La Land. So it's like, okay, yep, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about like, why do sort of these big finales often feel overwrought? Like, forget about Endgame, because Endgame is like, it is what it is. Like the whole MCU is like nothing else, right? But Rise of Skywalker, I think, is a good example where it's just like, there's 7 new characters who weren't in the last 2 movies, some of whom are from the previous, some of whom are brand new. and most of them don't really matter in any way, like, and they're just sort of like side characters for someone to talk to. And so, and like there's a lot of like MacGuffin-y stuff, so we got to go get the wayfinder to go to the place and that kind of thing. And I think what was great about this was that every plot point and every character was all tied around this central thing of Bond's relationship with Madeline, and then obviously Mathilde. And so, like as you were saying, Trisha, it's like even just that opening sequence, it's like, okay, we have an action scene, but it starts at Vesper's tomb. Like, so Bond is, is healing from something, but then where's Madeline? Like, he's got to go save her. And then, wait a minute, did she betray him? Now he's got to figure that out. And then if you look at the entire plot of the movie, is there stuff that could have been cut? Is there stuff? Sure, whatever. But like Felix doesn't just show up on the side. Felix is like the person who gets Bond kind of back in the game. And then obviously like the CIA and MI6 are sort of having their back and forth. And then the villain, his whole thing is about Madeline. And then Blofeld is, his whole thing. Like, so just everything feels like it is all tied around this central emotional storyline, and all of the plot pieces and characters feel like they're all in the same story, and not just like, how do we get a Felix cameo in here? How do we get, even like Ana de Armas, who shows up for a fun little Knives Out reunion? It's still like, okay, maybe this character like could be scrapped from the movie easily, but it's also like the most fun scene in the movie. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just everything feels very centralized, and like it, so I don't ever feel like, we have to get through this thing to get to the next thing or whatever. It all just feels like it's part of the same story, and that was really, really good.
Yeah. This episode of Beyond the Screenplay is sponsored by CuriosityStream and Nebula. CuriosityStream is the best place to find thousands of great documentaries on all kinds of subjects. For example, right now they're doing an 8-week special event called Secrets of the Universe. This series features new documentaries about the James Webb Space Telescope, NASA's first space station, searching for Earth-like planets, and more. It's a great way to learn about the history and future of space travel. An annual plan for CuriosityStream is less than $15 a year when you sign up at our link, curiositystream.com/screenplay. But it gets even better. When you sign up at that link, you also get complimentary access to Nebula. Nebula is a subscription streaming service where you can support your favorite creators while getting access to a bunch of exclusive content. It was created by and features a bunch of educational-ish YouTubers, many of whom you probably know. Patrick H. Willems, Just Right, Like Stories of Old, Game Maker's Toolkit, Thomas Flight, and many more. It's a place where we can create experimental content without having to please the algorithm gods. There are no sponsor spots, and you can get extended cuts of public videos, as well as original companion videos and series. It's a great way to support your favorite creators, and, as I mentioned, when you sign up for CuriosityStream, you get access to Nebula as well. So head to curiositystream.com/screenplay to get access to Nebula and CuriosityStream for less than $15 a year. The link is in the show notes or on screen right now if you're watching on YouTube. Thanks to CuriosityStream for sponsoring Beyond the Screenplay.
Yeah, so to respond to that quickly, Brian, I have mixed feelings about the thing that you're describing, because I think one of the symptoms of a kind of Bond movie that I tend not to like as much is the overly scheming, like overly planned villain trope almost, which I feel like Spectre is the worst example and worst offender of this, where it's like somehow Christoph Waltz's version of Blofeld has overly schemed everything to lead Bond here for his personal psychological torture. Like, the megalomaniac's plan is somehow also intimately involved in wanting to harm Bond personally.
Of course.
I just find that kind of villain pretty unbelievable, where if, somebody like Silva in Skyfall, his plan is to get M, And it happens to bring him into conflict with Bond. And he happens to know quite a bit about Bond, but he's not necessarily concerned. He has a goal apart from Bond. And
Right.
he's not necessarily overly concerned with harming Bond psychologically, personally, or just like hurting Bond's feelings. I don't know. Somehow when a Bond villain is like, I'm going to hurt his feelings.
Yeah.
I always get a little bit like, okay, like, and then also you're going to turn millions of people into a virus.
Right.
Okay,
And then
yeah.
To do what? Why?
Yeah.
Anyway, there's just a lot. And so my thought on this was having Rami Malek's character, his name is Safin. Thank you. Having Safin
Lucifer.
it is a pretty good Bond villain name. But having Safin have a personal connection to Madeline gets you some interesting scenes.
Right.
It gets you some really interesting, it gets you that lovely, very beautifully shot sort of, meaty opening part for Madeline. And it gives Madeline a really interesting dimensionality and a lot to do in this movie, which I think is a good thing overall. And it gets you some of the, like, we have to involve Madeline later on because he's going to come back to get her, right? He's like overly concerned with this whole thing. But at the same time, it strains credulity, and not in a fun, like, the villain, has a laser beam in space. Not in that kind of a strains credulity way, but in like villains that are concerned with Bond's psychological state or who he's in love with always seem a little bit unbelievable to me, or just a little bit convenient. And especially when they're overly plotting to that end. And I feel like this movie really comes close to some of that stuff that I don't like, but at the same time, I'm not sure how I would have done it differently. Like, I wonder if there's a way to clean up Safin's plan so that it still has to involve Madeline, but it doesn't have to be like, he was the assassin from way back then. I think there's just like some convenience things there that I feel like you could have neatened up a bit.
Yeah, I know. I totally agree. And because it's like, it's very Bond villainy kind of stuff. But I think it's the tricky thing, especially for this final movie, where it's like you want everything to be as like emotionally tied to what Bond's emotional through line is. Because the other end of that spectrum is like the love interest is like at home waiting, really hoping that the hero comes home or whatever, where it's like they're not involved in the plot at all. So, and it's like really hard to find that middle ground where it's like they are involved in the plot, but they're not. It's not this like thing of the person being like, I want to hurt your family because you hurt my family kind of thing. So yeah, it is very Bond villainy, but at the same time, it is like, I think it's like the necessary evil, suspension of disbelief you need. Or not you need, I'm not saying it couldn't have been done better, but just to be like, we want Madeline to be as focal in this movie as possible. And we want Bond's emotional journey to be as focal as possible. So hence the villain is going to have, like, that is going to be his goal, that kind of thing.
I think for me, the problem is just how muddy the overall villain plan is. I think for Safin.
Right.
Because I think, once again, in Skyfall, you're right, Trisha, like it's the plan is about M's and James Bond cares about M. So that's already that's the whole plan. In this movie, we have a lot of different threads with Safin. There's this feeling that, Mr. White, Madeline's father, killed his whole family. So he was out for revenge, but then he saved her and has kind of like an affection for her or something.
Obsession?
Obsession. But then also, is any of that related to his like weirdly prescient like pandemic plan?
Right.
Like the screenwriters of this movie must have been like really weirded out when near the premiere date it was like, we can't premiere this movie because of a global pandemic.
Yeah.
Now we understand why they kept pushing it back.
Right.
Far.
Yeah. No, there's somebody who was tweeting. They were like, now I think I understand why this couldn't come out at all last year.
Yeah.
But I may have been said in the film, but it was just hard to hear some of the audio or the dialogue. But I still don't understand how it's all connected. Like, how was the death of his family at the hands of Mr. White how did that lead him to want to destroy entire populations to tidy up the world or something? And how does this tie back to Madeline?
Right.
That's what's frustrating is like it's almost all there, but that was the one part of like the final act that didn't land for me was what is this all about ultimately for this villain character? Like he seems to have different desires that are not connected. Maybe they are and I missed it, but it was annoying that it wasn't clear to me. Also, if they're using nanobots to spread a pandemic, do you have to like grow nanobots in like a liquid goop in a giant pool? Or like, I was also really confused about that whole finale. Like, what is this place? What is the technology? What are they like? What is the organic thing they seem to be growing here? If the thing that they're doing is robots, anyway. So yeah, the whole finale, I was half in, half out because I was so confused about what this place even was, how it functions, and why. Like, why does he want to unleash a gigantic pandemic on the whole world and kill everybody? Yeah. So
there's some really fun editorializing that somebody did who wrote the Wikipedia article for like summarizing the plot of this. Which I recommend everybody go to read, because the next day I was like, hang on, I need to go back and read the Wikipedia summary of this entire plot. And somebody wrote like, despite having succeeded in his mission at killing Blofeld and taking down Spectre, Safin continues his rampage. You're just like, there is a certain point in the movie where you're like, yep, he got his revenge. Now what's he doing?
yeah.
And like, you're gonna kill everybody. Is that the end of your plot? Like, what happens after that? And then there's like an ideological piece, right, where it's like he's trying to establish some kind of new world order, new society.
But like,
it's
to what
very
end?
vague.
Yeah.
It's so vague. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't get the sense that he was going to kill everybody, but just like you have the ability to kill everybody and whomever you want, and you're going to sell that to nations and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But I do feel like I agree that the villain in this is absolutely the weakest part of the movie.
Yeah.
I think for
Yes.
me, if you were going to pick a thing to make the weakest part in service of everything else, I'm very happy that it was Safin.
I think that's
because I usually don't care about the villain's plan, or like the villain's plan in a movie like this is usually some crazy big thing of like, we're gonna hack all the satellites, or we're gonna launch all like, it's always we're gonna do a whole bunch of bad to everything and James Bond is gonna stop it in the end. So like, I probably just personally didn't care that much about the machinations of how it all worked. I agree that it didn't make sense and I didn't understand or follow his connection to it, but I also didn't care because I was so involved with what was going on with Bond, and I think there was enough stakes with the cutting to M and Q and Moneypenny like in the office, like there's political pressure. I don't exactly understand why or what's going to happen, but it's bad and they're really worried, and like getting that intercutting was going. So I agree that the villain is weak, but I think I'm so happy that they didn't spend another 20 minutes making me try to understand or care about his thing, because there was so much else happening in this movie that I did care about, that we did get time with.
Yeah.
I mean, he does have one of the least eventful deaths of any villain in any Bond movie. You're just like the most, forget about this guy, he doesn't matter moments for a death for Safin. But I just think the only thing that really annoys me about it is, I agree with you. I just don't know why they had to connect him to Madeline so much. Like, he could have just kidnapped her and that would have been like, and not have had a personal history with her.
Right.
Like, I just think the personal history piece makes his plan act like it's more important than it is, which draws your attention to some of the plot hole things that it doesn't need to draw your attention to. But at the same time, like I said, we get all of this good stuff out of it. Like, we get all these like weighty emotional moments out of it for everybody involved that make this, really compelling to watch, where it's like, it feels like, especially for Bond and for Madeline, there's like a lot of baggage, and that kind of where the theme kind of lives and exists in this movie, which I think is really fascinating and I want to get to. So you get a lot of good stuff out of that choice, but at the same time, the choice is calling attention to the sillier, bondier plot elements that I feel like you should just definitely brush over with the lightest touch possible in almost any Bond movie. Like, don't worry about what the villain's plan is, so then don't make it about the villain's plan.
Well, it's weird because I feel like his connection to Madeline I really liked and I thought made sense.
Yeah,
and it was
same.
cool to, in Spectre, we hear her tell the story of like, how she knows how to use a gun. So it was fun. I'm glad I rewatched Spectre because I wouldn't have thought that like, oh, we're getting to see that moment. And that's actually setting up the bad guy for this one. So his connection to her, I think, made sense to me. But when his caring about Bond and like her past using her to kill Blofeld, that's when I started feeling all the things you're talking about of like, why is he so emotionally invested in Bond's headspace at any given time or Bond's family and all of that stuff.
It's funny because it's almost like we're bumping on different parts of the villain, but it seems like in generally there's something bumpy here. But yeah, for me, and maybe this is because I'm too into the nerdy sci-fi stuff, it seemed like there was like something thematic trying to be said, because this is a very particular technology that they're using where it's like genetic and DNA, and like this can wipe out like genetic populations, like very genocide.
Right. I mean,
like,
a virus that can target a specific person, but like can be carried by anyone,
or like genetic traits. I mean, even the Russian scientist even said something to 007, 006, Nomi, whatever her name is by the end. About like, I could wipe out all of West Africa or something. Like, it was getting into this interesting, very gnarly place of talking about like using this stuff for genocide. So anyway, that was just where I was. It felt like they tiptoed enough into like really touchy, interesting themes with this type of super weapon. Like, it's not just a giant laser to blow up the world. It's about DNA and genetics and familial ties. And anyway, it seemed like there was a lot of specificity in that. And to have it not for the villain, for me to not understand why the villain cares about that specificity by the end was just a little bit bewildering. Like why are you invested in this technology and propagating it and like mass manufacturing it here? What's your ideology? Like, why do you believe in this technology?
I agree that that is one of the bumps for sure that doesn't make sense. I think for me it does work, and I think this is where we can maybe like start bringing in theme, because I feel like as soon as they started explaining how the technology works and what it was, I was like, oh, this is like the theme in weapon form. Like, this is all designed to make things really hard for Bond and also set up this like a physical expression of how I read this anyway, of like Bond kills the people he touches. Like,
he's literally toxic.
Literally, the end is literally that. Like,
right.
Yeah.
And so as soon as they started talking about that, because they'd kind of raised hints about this, and it's a conversation already about Bond, I was like, oh, okay, we're going there. We're going to talk about like, can Bond exist now? Can he love? Can he have a family? Can any of these things like exist if Bond is alive? And like, the solution is like, no, like Bond will kill anyone he touches. So if he actually cares about something, he has to not be there. Like, I think that the thematic exploration and statement was like so big and bold, and I was just like, wow, you went there. That's so cool. That everything that was connected to that like got a pass for me because of what it was doing thematically.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I think it's such a fascinating, and I agree, really bold and refreshing choice for a theme. And it's on the nose, but the literalization of like, no, Bond is toxic, and like him recognizing that he needs to remove himself from the lives of people that he cares about is a very strong thematic conclusion for this movie. I think that it becomes like a little bit of a meta thing about legacy as well, right? Like, there's a generational thing happening for everyone. Like I think even M is in this position where he's looking at his choices and his legacy, and the legacy of like the office that he's inherited, and stepped into. And they've got all those portraits, the oil portraits on the wall of all the like M's that there have ever been, which is fun. But yeah, there's this like question of legacy of like, what do we inherit? And if it is toxic, like, what do we do with that? And, that's what I was kind of saying, what you get from having this backstory for Safin and this backstory for Madeline. Like Madeline also inherited something toxic from her father, who was involved in this organization with Blofeld, and he inherited something toxic from his father. Like Blofeld's father is the one that he blames for his whole thing. And like, the movie is definitely reminding us of those themes of legacy and like what we inherit from the generations that have gone before us. And so as a conclusion for this chapter of the Bond franchise, I give it yes, like very cool. Like what a cool thematic conversation to do. I think that the movie is imperfect and doesn't, all the way hold together thematically, and like also just is messy overall. As we're pointing out, with like this sort of bumpy villain situation, and there's like I have other bumps in here as well. But by the end, I'm just like, oh hell yeah. And it was, can I just talk about how cool it was also to see in the last scene where they're like drinking a toast to James Bond, like looking in this office where we have like M, who kind of looks like a classic standard M from like old Bond movies, but we have two women of color in that room. And then they also like sort of made Q being gay canon in this movie.
Yeah, I love
and
that.
I'm just like, this is cool that these are the people that are left and James Bond is not here anymore. And this is like kind of where we are now with the franchise. I was just really moved by all of that.
Yeah.
And if you are not, why are you listening to this podcast?
Thank you.
Yeah, because there are those people who are very vocal right now about this movie.
Right.
No, but it does bring up this sort of idea of going back to the idea of the question of what is Bond that we were talking about in Skyfall. Because I was thinking, we have this. We talked about this with like Crystal Skull, where we have this like, well, here's what movies are now. So we don't want movies that aren't that unless they do it in like some amazing way or whatever. So I was thinking, like, what about, for instance, if we look at very micro, what about the Ana de Armas sequence isn't like a Rebecca Ferguson fight from the Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, for instance? Forget about the context and the characters, but just like the actual action sequence, What about the motorcycle chase at the beginning isn't just a Bourne action scene, So it's like we are getting sort of cut and paste a little with those very surface level things. But then when you zoom out and it's like, well, who is Bond that Ethan Hunt or Jason Bourne isn't, And again, that's where we get into this theme. He kills the people around him. Like that is a thing that happens way more in Bond movies than those other franchises. This is like everyone dies all the time. And like you were saying, Michael, like, can he even have like, I want to see Bond and his family go live on an island somewhere, but is that even possible? Or like, will it always,
Right.
And then you get the other sort of surface level things, which, and maybe this is why Safin is a little messy, is because they are trying to incorporate, and I think they did it really beautifully, all these Bond things into this movie. So you have the lair, you have the villain with like the big plan that's like, we want it to be emotional and personal to Bond, but we also want it to be like end of the world type stuff. So we kind of have to do everything at once. But then there's also just other Bond things, gadgets and some camp. We get Henchman Inspector in this, which we didn't really get in the first three movies. We got Dave Bautista, we got Eye-Boy.
And so many eye-face
Cyclops.
disfiguring things.
Yeah.
His name is Cyclops. Like, come on now.
Right.
What else are you gonna call him?
Sure. But I was thinking, like that's, and if you look at Quantum of Solace, which is a movie that I like, but it's not a Bond movie, right? Like there's so little about it that has Bond stuff. So could you replace Bond with Jason Bourne and do the exact same movie? You couldn't totally, obviously, but like how much of Quantum of Solace is like, oh, this is Bond. And I think No Time to Die did a really good job of being like, every Bond thing you can think of is here. Even just like the color palette of the third act in that underground, it just felt like there's like a 60s-ness to it and that kind of thing. So I think that was something I was really appreciating, was being able to say like, well, if we are in this franchise, there are things people expect. So like, how do we get them in here while also making a 2021 or 2020 at the time, obviously, movie that feels current and relevant. And I think for some flaws, it did a really solid job of that.
The idea of a Blofeld birthday party is like the most old school. I was like, can we have a Blofeld birthday? Okay.
Well, that Cuba scene was a lot of fun because
so
much fun.
From top to bottom, the whole Cuba sequence was just a blast, and it's what you want in that kind of second act, like fun and games part of the movie. You want just like to just have some fun for a while before things get really dark and heavy and the stakes are really high. And I mean, can we talk about Ana de Armas for a minute? Like,
please.
Why can't she just be in the rest of this movie too? Like, she's just
right.
so much fun. What a great approach to a Bond girl, where she has like, she's doing kind of her Knives Out thing almost, of like, I'm a little nervous and kind of new at this, but then I also totally kick ass and I'm look so cool fighting in this dress.
Yeah,
I'm waiting for Bond to just be like, you are a good spy.
But that Cuba sequence I really appreciated, because even the moment when the eye is on a platter and the spotlights go on Bond, it's going to a place that Skyfall would never have gone to. Like Skyfall was too serious for this, but this movie is attempting to tonally balance all the Bond things and somehow getting away with it in a really remarkable way. Like I was eased into that Cuba sequence in a way where it didn't feel like there was a sudden left turn and I was kind of, whoa, what movie are we in? And I was like eased out of it into the more serious stuff with, oh my God, maybe I have a daughter. Oh my God, now we're being chased and she's being abducted. The movie made those transitions in a smooth enough way that I didn't have whiplash. And it does, like, once again, I think Endgame is this recent example of a movie that just impossibly does all the things that it shouldn't be able to do all in one movie, but it just pulls it off. And this is one of those movies where it's gonna feel a bit messy inevitably because it's doing so much, but damn, it did it all, and it did it without giving me whiplash and without feeling like a total mess. Like it's just a really remarkable achievement.
Yeah, I think exactly like you guys are saying, and it's almost like within this movie, and this is why, as we're saying, I want to see it again to like better track this. But it is like, there are moments that feel Casino Royale. There are moments like the Cuba scene that feels like old school Bond. Like, we're gonna walk around a party and we're gonna have radios and everyone's gonna look amazing and they're in their suits and their dresses and then we're gonna fight and shoot things. But then it goes to like, the relationship plays with like Madeline and Spectre, and then it goes to this new, like, Bond has a daughter. What do we do with that? And by the end, the one thought I was having was like, around the time that like Bond was, effectively like driving like a minivan away from the bad guys with like his family in the back, I was like, this doesn't feel like Bond anymore, because this is something that Bond has never done before.
Right.
And I like that, but I also could feel the decoupling of like, okay, this is not a normal Bond thing anymore. We're doing something new. I think that's cool. But I'm kind of left with, and this is kind of maybe the last thing I want to like hear all your guys' thoughts about, is like, what does this mean for Bond moving forward? Because I think that the boldness of the theme and how it ends feels like it's almost like the death knell of like what Bond, like, can we have a Bond if we've just kind of decided that Bond as historically executed is toxic and like leaves behind a path of destruction, and isn't, is this a hero still that we can have? Is there room for James Bond moving forward?
I almost expected, I was like, what if this movie ends and then, we cut to black and then text comes on screen that says like, this is the final James Bond movie from the Broccolis. Like,
Right.
we've had a great time with this, and thank you, or something like that. And that would have been like ballsy, you know. But I went into this movie being like, oh, this is the first time Bond could die, and I knew that was a possibility. The second I didn't even know it was the dude. The second he looked down, I was like, like like he's like, I'm gonna escape, but like, wait, something's wrong, and I was like, I don't even know what's wrong yet, but like, where this is happening. And I think what's beautiful though about these 5 films is that this, like, what better way to say these 5 films are their own standalone story. The very first scene of Casino Royale is Bond getting his 007 status. The very final scene, you know, or finale of No Time to Die is the death of James Bond. But then after the credits, text comes on screen, James Bond will return, you know, so like we'll see what that means. But
Was that there?
Yeah.
How did I
Yeah.
miss that?
At the very end.
Oh,
Yeah.
I totally missed that. Wow.
I was hoping and praying it would say 007 will return,
Right.
but it said James Bond will return.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that brings us to the next thing is like, I personally, so it's like, yeah, what is the future of James Bond? Obviously, I personally am more interested in seeing, like you said, Trisha, like, well, we still have this cast of characters, so like now we can have the JBU, right, where it's just like we get the new 007, you know, let's know me movie. And who, like, I loved her character, but her character was so sort of flat for the first 2 acts because she was just sort of like the foil, and then in the third act I was like, oh, okay, cool, I like you now, like I want to see more of you. Or like we get the Moneypenny movie, we get the whatever, and we just get like MI6, the something, the series, or the whatever. But inevitably there will be a new James Bond. But even if we bring back these actors and we say, oh, there's a new James Bond, and Ray Fiennes is playing M again and whatever, it is still, they still did it where they said these 5 films are these 5 films, period. And I think that is something that's really cool and special. And like for us who have lived with these movies from our like early 20s to now, it's like, even if we grew up with like Pierce Brosnan and stuff, it's like this feels like the same people, the Infinity Saga, the same way the Infinity Saga feels like this 10 years of some people's lives. Like this was 15 years of our life of just this one story that was told over 5 films. Whatever happens next, I'm interested, but it is always going to be separated from this complete story that was told over these films.
Totally.
Yeah, I have about a million thoughts and feelings about all of this. But I'll try to keep them all together, I guess, or like moving in one direction, because I'm really conflicted. Because this, you know, is textually, as I said, dealing with the legacy of James Bond. And I love the choice to give him a child. I think it is unrealistic to act like James Bond doesn't have many children running around the world. I was like, why did nobody do this before? Of course he has kids. Like, although not, because the women always die. But
Right.
But I love the choice here. It's a simple one. Although Madeline, like, she's not yours. I'm like, girl, please. Like, why is she in this movie if she's not his? But yeah, I love the choice there. It's really simple and really beautiful, and makes the entire last act of this movie just, my heart is in my throat the entire time. I'm like, nothing bad better ever happened to that child. Ever. And any scene that she is in, it's just the simplest ingredient that gives every scene this tension. Even though I don't think the movie's gonna hurt her, I still am with the character enough where my heart is just sick with worry.
Right. I feel like that scene where they're driving away, the car chase that then becomes Bond as Rambo in the fort, like all of that works, even though it doesn't like feel classic Bond action scene. I'm so in it because the stakes are so high, and it's like you're watching Bond protect his family, which you've never like seen before.
Yeah.
Continue.
When that scene like was taking off, it was thrilling, because it was like, we just crossed a threshold here. Like, I've never seen Bond like fight for this. Like the stakes are like infinitely higher suddenly. And that was a really cool feeling. And part of why, I do almost wish this was the final James Bond movie. Like why can't this be the end? Like, what a great ending. And he crossed this final threshold. Like, where else is there to go now? Trisha, where do we go now?
Well, that's the thing that I don't know. I mean, you know, in a normal and worse version of this, Indiana Jones 4, you give him a son, right? And then like there's a son, and you try to do like a handoff, and it's very possible that they are gonna make Mathilde like a spy and down the line, you know, and that's kind of, and Michael, you're looking like you might be into that.
I just feel like if you're ending this movie with this kind of theme of like all the bad things that come with being a 00 agent, it also like would make me a little bit sad if like his daughter then grows up to be a trained assassin also.
That's exactly what I was gonna say, is like that's the easy and like kind of bad choice that I don't want. And that's kind of why I love that it's a daughter, where that's, I feel like, not so likely, and especially because we see the lengths that Madeline has gone to like protect her and keep her away from James Bond and keep her out of this world and try to keep her safe, and all of this stuff. And so I don't want it to go that direction. I wish that, here's what I would do if I were the Broccoli's. I'm not the Broccoli's. But if you are obligated to financially protect your franchise, which you are, and yet you have, in a really remarkable way, faced head on the legacy of this character and this world that you've created, then I think keeping the spy movie thing going is something that you can and probably should do. So having another character play 007 and or somebody like Nomi, like it doesn't necessarily have to be her, but somebody like her. You could even do like, you know, obviously Paloma is being set up as the new Felix Leiter, which is really cool. Like I want like the Nomi and Paloma movie where they're like bonding and Felix Leitering around, doing international espionage. I would watch the hell out of that. But I think it would be cool to introduce a new Bond in a spin-off movie. Like, so if you have a movie that you're just like, this is not a James Bond movie, this is an MI6 movie.
Right.
It's got some of your Bond characters in it. Maybe Moneypenny's in it, or Q, or whoever. Like, this is an MI6 movie. Just come along with us for the ride. And then, like, introduce a character who can become James Bond in that movie.
Right.
That helps to create that, like, continuity feeling that you probably want from, like, an MI6 universe or a 007 universe. And it avoids, like, the whole big casting uproar controversy thing that you are going to get. I mean, people will still do it and you won't be able to keep it a surprise, and it'll still be like a whole big thing if you try to do it this way. But at least it would, like, instead of forcing that character to carry his own movie the first time he walks out on screen, you kind of would give him a place to exist that doesn't hang it all on him. It just, I think, would expand our imaginations, but also just give that character more room to play and be his own version of the character, where he can go places and do things that James Bond, as we know him, maybe he's even called James Bond, but just give him some more space, like expand the boundaries of who and what the character is.
Right.
I think that's probably what I would do.
Yeah, real quick, it's funny because normally it's like, in most franchises, you're either going to do a complete clean reboot and be like, here's this character again and whatever, or you're going to introduce like a new 007 who is not James Bond and be like, oh, we're still in this world. But as we talked about in Skyfall, like, this is this weird franchise where you just kind of do whatever you want. So you'd be like, remember how James Bond died last movie? Well, here's James Bond played by this other person who like does, that other one doesn't exist in this, even though the characters do, like, whatever. So it's this weird franchise where they can kind of do whatever they want. And I have faith that they'll figure it out. They're not going to just go
so
back
curious to see.
Yeah.
They put themselves in a bit of a bind because they did have such a MCU style world building continuity in these 5 films that didn't exist in the previous films.
Exactly.
So you could just jump from, you know, Brosnan to Daniel Craig, but M is still the same actress, you know?
Right.
But can you do that with what they've built here? Because this is so much more of like a tangible, you know, continuity type of world. Is it weird for Moneypenny played by Naomi Harris, to walk into a room and say, "Hi, James," to like a new actor who
Right.
like, if like she like listened to him die in the previous movie, like I don't.
would kind of like it. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of why I like this franchise. I, for the record, I don't think they're going to do that.
Mhm.
I agree with
Yeah.
you. It's probably not what modern audiences want, but as a person who doesn't watch TV or like it that much, and I'm not really here for long form storytelling, I'm kind of like, start over. Like, I don't know.
Right.
I don't need all the baggage is the thing. Like, what if you
Yeah.
just came
Mhm.
at it clean? And what if, wouldn't it be like a cool move to, without like having to bring along a bunch of shit from the past, you could make a new cool spy franchise. A
Right.
new cool spy franchise that you could bring some of the best parts of what Bond is and explode all the rest of it. Let it die on that island with the silo doors that are open now. Like, let it die there. He got shot so many times before he did that. I just need to say that. So many gunshot wounds before you gave up your life that way. But if you could just leave behind all of that stuff and really build something new with all the stuff that you want and none of the stuff you don't, in a way that Casino Royale, I think, did pretty well. Like, I want another sort of Casino Royale kind of reboot of this, but I don't think I'm going to get that. I think I'm going to get something in the middle.
Mhm.
It'll be very interesting to see where it all goes. And it is interesting that we're kind of at this point in culture where these big sagas that have either been reprising things like Star Wars, or continuing things like James Bond, or creating new things and then finishing them like Endgame and the MCU. Now that they've kind of finished their big things, like what happens next? And that's kind of interesting to see the different approaches that are emerging in the Star Warses and the MCUs and different mediums and all that stuff. So it'll be very interesting to see where James Bond goes from here. There's so much that we could keep talking about. We talked about the cinematography a little bit. I wanted to
Oh my
just
God.
shout out the like James Bond going up the stairs, simulated long take was
Yeah.
pretty
Oh,
cool.
yeah.
It felt very
True Detective.
True Detective,
Yeah.
and then Atomic Blonde also has this
Oh,
very
yeah.
famous like long, but I feel like it was really nice. It reminded me a little bit of, there's a game called Metal Gear Solid, and in like the fourth Metal Gear Solid, which is kind of like about the end of this character's journey, he's like dying of radiation and you're playing him and you're just like getting him to crawl like barely to the next thing. And as the player, you have to mash the button as fast as you can for like 90 seconds straight. So like physically you feel the exhaustion as he's moving forward. I feel like that long take did that for me as an audience with James Bond, of like, he's doing so much work right now to like save the world. And then like Q calls and he's just like, yeah, I'm here. Like it made you feel a little bit that the experience of what it must be like to be Bond actually having to do these things. So
Right.
anyway, lots of really fun things in this movie. I'm excited to watch it again, and we'll have to see, where James Bond goes from here. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.